It's Sunday evening and the E4 Festival is wrapping up. And this upcoming week is going to be really exciting because on Friday we're taking my e-truck on a tour to Spain with a double driver setup. But first, I want to talk about something I've never really covered before: the gateway into electric trucking. Since there isn't permanent infrastructure for charging a ton of EVs at this festival, they rely on mobile DC chargers. These mobile chargers take AC power from the grid, convert it to DC, and send it straight to the battery. Here we have a 40 kilowatt DC charger, which is a great solution if you don't have a charging setup yet, but want to test out an electric truck. Some companies even offer them for rent, making it easy to build flexible charging infrastructure. These chargers use 63 amp 3-phase power connections, and I believe they can even go up to 125 amps, meaning you could potentially get up to 80 kilowatts of charging power. If you have an industrial facility with the right connections, you can just roll this unit into place, plug it in, and charge your truck. For overnight charging, this setup is usually more than enough. Good morning and welcome to a new week. This week starts off pretty relaxed. As you saw in the last video, I drove south with a fully loaded trailer. Now, I've got 5 delivery stops in the Frankfurt-Mainz region. 4 of them today. 2 are in the morning, so it's a fairly easy schedule. My first stop is at 8:30 a.m. and I've already checked in. Altogether, I'll be driving about 300 kilometers today. No need for a mid-trip charge since I started with a full battery. I'll just have to find a rest stop in the evening to top up. Now I'm at my second drop-off in Mainz, delivering 12 trees. There's a lot of curiosity about my truck because this company is somewhat into e-mobility. They have a plug-in hybrid, and I just saw an ID.4 GTX drive by. When businesses already have some exposure to electric vehicles, the conversation naturally comes up. Now I'm at the third drop-off, where they're unloading 2 massive tilia trees. The trailer was super handy since I could adjust the roof height and tilt the side for easier unloading. We're on lunch break, and this rest stop in Wörstadt is pretty modern. The parking system uses license plate recognition, and if you leave within an hour, you don't need to pay. Behind the rest stop are Tesla superchargers and also Alpatronic chargers from Allego. But truck drivers should avoid Allego. The prices are crazy, and after 45 minutes, you get hit with blocking fees. And there's a construction site here for new Ionity chargers. It's a mix of Halo and Alpatronic chargers. Hopefully there won't be any height restrictions, which would make this spot a great place for overnight charging. I'm done for the day since I've completed all my scheduled deliveries, but I already called my last stop, which was planned for tomorrow. Since I'm so good in time, I can already unload today at 3 p.m. After that, I'll head to a charging station and get ready for new assignments. Feels great to get things done ahead of schedule. But right now, I'm in this small village with a super tight S-curve. Trucks are allowed through, and I already made it once. Taking a turn like this straight off a main road into a village is always risky. Not the best idea, honestly. I'm now in Bensheim, right in the middle of the pedestrian zone. Sounds like a problem, but this was actually planned. The bank here is being renovated and they're getting some nice new trees. And guess who's delivering them? Later I'll just have to back out the way I came. Let's just hope I can get out just as smoothly. I'm charging here in Bensheim and you can see the layout issues of this truck charging park. The Volvo is charging on the right side, which was common back in the day, but now most trucks charge on the left. This means I can't use the other slot, but it's not a big deal because I was planning to park here anyway, and can now reserve a spot with my trailer. I also spoke with the driver of the electric truck. He's using this truck without a depot charger. This means he has a relatively short range and depends on public charging stations. He said it's challenging, and I think his life would be much easier if he had a truck with 500 kilometers of range like mine. More range really brings more comfort, especially when you can't charge at a depot. If I'm out all week, I don't charge at the depot either, and I could manage even with a smaller range. So, it's doable, but more is better when it comes to range. It's a nice symbiosis between cars and trucks here. The car charges at the truck charger, and I'm charging at the car charger. We're all friends. I want to point out something important that you will have noticed watching my videos. As so often, my charger isn't providing full power. At the spot where the BYD is, the other two chargers are down, and one station is completely offline. We don't need faster MCS chargers. We need a widespread, reliable 400 kilowatt CCS infrastructure. If it's not reliable, then we need to have a lot more chargers available to compensate for it. That's what's really needed right now, because without, long-distance electric trucking is not feasible or predictable. If we build fewer but faster MCS chargers that are more heavily used, but just as unreliable, the damage is even bigger. I just went for a walk with the dog, and now a cooling trailer parked next to us. It's a bit loud, but still manageable, but what I just noticed is that the charging park has a complete outage. I can't even come up with why this is happening. Even if we were to assume there are load spikes, causing them to limit the power, it wouldn't make sense to completely shut everything down. They would just limit it, not turn it off entirely. I've never seen something like this before. I'm on my way to Fulda because there's another branch of Nano Janssen, specifically from Nano Janssen Jr., who also shares the same name, which is quite handy since they don't have to rebrand the trucks every family generation. From Fulda, we're driving to Spain, specifically Madrid. It's over 2,000 kilometers, and we're leaving on Friday. Right now, we've got a half-full trailer, so we're figuring out if we can take anything else along. That'll probably take another day or two to finalize, so I'm dropping the truck off for now and take a little break until Friday. A lot of people ask me if driving a truck all day gets boring, and I can say for sure, absolutely not. It's always exciting what you experience while driving the truck, and you can multitask a bit on the highway. Right now, I'm in a board meeting for ChargeX, so while I'm driving, I can listen to the investors and shareholders, as well as my co-founder and successor, and see how they're managing ChargeX. I think it's amazing because this smartphone is actually a 6-year-old Samsung Note 9. It's the one I use for everything: navigation, logging into sessions, editing videos. It's incredible what you can do with a smartphone today. You don't even need a new one. I got this one for €200 5 years ago, and it's enabled me to do so much, including growing this YouTube channel. So, don't believe you need expensive equipment to get started. You just need a smartphone. I'm always amazed at how well it works and how many doors it's opened for me. It's an amazing world we live in today. I'm currently in Eichenzel, and I've already optimized a bit. If you leave the rest stop within 15 minutes, it's free. So I dropped off my trailer and drove out to charge. You can sneak through this short restricted area, so you don't have to drive around the entire rest stop. The Audi here isn't just sitting there for fun, it's actually charging. It has a lockable 3-phase power plug. I suspect the rest area operator drives this electric car, similar to the car wash operator I met before. There are also new V4 superchargers being installed here, so in Eichenzel, there's no need to complain. There are plenty of charging options. Good morning. It's Friday today because I had the last 2 days off. The first was a holiday in Lower Saxony, and the other because the truck was already stationed in Fulda, where we're starting today. I got one of Nano Janssen's MG5 pool vehicles for those days and drove it to my hometown. I left at midnight so I could be in Fulda by just before 6 a.m. I'm going to pick up another load, and then I'm heading to Madrid, but we've also got a load for Malaga now, which means we're heading a bit further south. I'll be picking up 18 pallets this morning, and we'll do my daily rest break afterward. That way, when we depart by 8 p.m., I'll have full driving time available for the rest of the trip. We're going to be driving in a double driver setup, which I'll explain later, and thankfully I took a nap, so I'm better prepared. I've driven a few days with this MG5 now, and I have to say, it's a nice electric station wagon with plenty of space. It has a 60 kilowatt-hour battery, so it offers real 300-kilometer highway range. I'm usually driving around 110 kilometers per hour, and the driver assistance systems are top-notch too, including adaptive cruise control, nice overtaking acceleration, a 360-degree camera, bi-directional charging, Android Auto, and a great interface with physical buttons on the steering wheel. It got everything you'd want from an electric car. The only downside is the DC charging speed at 80 kilowatts, which it doesn't hold for long. The second downside might be the design and the fact that it's a Chinese electric car. It would obviously be much nicer if it were built in Europe by a European manufacturer, but you can't have everything. But I like it. It's decent for long-distance travel and would make an ideal family car. The truck is now half loaded, everything is secured, and the paperwork is ready. I also received a CMR consignment note, which is required for cross-border shipments. We need to hurry a bit because there's a driving ban in France on Sundays, so we have to make it through within 24 hours. But it's pretty tight because we want to start with full driving time, and for that, I need to take a 9-hour break. So, I have to park the truck in Fulda by 11 a.m. I stopped in Eichenzel to charge and wrap the truck. It now has blind spot stickers on the front, which is required for all vehicles over 3.5 tons in France. The truck needs it on both sides, the trailer on both sides, and also on the right rear. It doesn't matter whether the truck is French, German, or from elsewhere, everyone has to have them, or else you'll face a hefty fine. Now the stickers gives the truck the look of a true international long-distance vehicle. It's now Friday 9 p.m. and our wild journey begins. Nano is with me in double driver setup, which is new for me. It doesn't happen often that I'm in the passenger seat. It's the middle of the night, and we've made it through the first leg of our journey. We're now in Metz, and we found a huge charging park. Based on my research, we can't expect the rest of the trip to be as easy, so we shouldn't get too comfortable. The chargers here are Alpatronics with 300 kilowatts, and there are a few trucks blocking the chargers here, but only the ones that are not in operation, so it's all good. I've got to admit it was a great user experience with Fastned. You open the app, and it immediately recognizes via GPS that you're at the station. You just enter the number and the charging starts right away. Since we're driving in a double driver setup, the 45-minute rule isn't as important for us, so we charge as much as we can until the truck hits the 90% charge limit. I'll explain the other rules in more detail later. It's 7 a.m., and we're 50 kilometers from Paris. Usually, there are height restrictions at these rest areas because trucks and cars are strictly separated in France. Since the charging stations are often in the car sections, trucks can't access them. We'll likely have to break the rules and enter from behind. That had to happen sooner or later when there is no other way to access chargers. This is the final boss in France. These height restrictions are at every rest area. Cars on the left, trucks on the right, but here we can park right by the charging stations. I think it's just a lucky coincidence, as this access road used to be a service road, which you can see from older Google Street View images. It's a bit tight, so you need to be able to maneuver well to get out, but it's perfect for charging. We're doing the second stop, and while the first Fastned station didn't offer full power, this one is providing the full 300 kilowatts. But you have to hand it to Fastned. The layout of these charging parks is absolutely amazing. And the most important question is how much we're paying here at Fastned. In France, we pay 59 cents, which is actually 10 cents cheaper than in Germany. For this subscription model, you get a 25% discount, while in Germany it's 30%. The subscription costs €11.99, and it pays off after 81 kilowatt hours, meaning after charging 13.5% of the truck. Even if we never come back here, the subscription has already paid off. A big advantage of having two drivers is that we can fully utilize the battery. We don't have to stop when the driving time ends, but can quickly switch and keep going. This helps reduce the overall number of charging stops. We'll switch drivers quickly, and then I'll continue with the next leg of the journey. We're making the next charging stop and have chosen an Ionity charger that's not directly on the highway. We had to take a little detour through a small residential area. There's a small rest area, and we can already see the Ionity chargers. With a bit of luck, we'll be able to drive right in, but if we're unlucky, we might have to park the trailer elsewhere. We're charging at full power so we can really make the most of this break. It was a bit of maneuvering to get the truck in this position, but I did make a small driving error. I was a bit too optimistic. When we first drove in, I thought we could take a right turn, go behind the gas station, and then come straight back. However, the curve back there was too tight, so I ended up having to reverse the truck back out. It looks like we'll get out of here just fine, even if we have to drive against the one-way street. Not ideal for trucks, but it works. Another charging stop where we don't need to detach the trailer and the electricity is cheap. It's been a fun little adventure so far, and having Nano as the co-driver makes it even better, especially when it comes to reversing. It's a lot easier with someone watching for traffic. Now we're enjoying some coffee, and then we'll be on our way again. We topped up the battery, and now we're pushing on as far as we can. Even with two drivers, there are still some time limits we need to follow. I can still drive for another 1 hour and 46 minutes, so we'll stop at a small rest area in about 1 hour and 36 minutes, where we'll spend our Sunday. We planned to push through France on Saturday so that we could drive in Spain on Sunday since there's no driving ban there. However, in the northern Basque region, there's still a driving ban, so we would have had to make a longer detour. But it's not a big deal since we don't need to deliver the goods in Madrid until Tuesday morning, so we still have the whole Monday to drive. We'll park the truck at the rest stop from which we can walk to a small town. But let's see how the parking situation is. I have no experience with Saturday night parking at French rest areas. We arrived at the rest area where the three of us will be spending the night, as we didn't make it through France. That was an unrealistic plan because the double driver setup actually means you have a shift time of 30 hours. And within those 30 hours, you also have to take a rest of 9 or 11 hours. Since we had the reduced rest time, we're allowed to drive for 21 hours, and it's clear that this multi-driver operation is designed for both drivers to be driving the whole time with only an hour buffer. With the electric truck, even in a double driver setup, there are downsides due to the charging stops. We managed a bit under 10 driving hours today, but still we covered a lot of kilometers. Let me show you the tachograph for our setup. It has 2 slots for 2 driver cards, and you have to input the end time for each. Both the driver and the co-driver are logged, so everything is documented. I'm now pulling out my driver card from the left side because I was just driving. We've managed the shift time well, and tomorrow we'll have a day off here at the rest area, then we'll see how things go from there. I'm standing here with Nano in front of our truck, but this is truly the stereotypical trucker life. People are cooking next to us. They've already set up their kitchens. There's a lot going on, and there are no German trucks around, so we really stand out because of the German license plate and the electric lettering on the truck. Several truckers have already asked what we're doing here and how we got here. And now I've got Nano with me. You haven't properly introduced yourself yet.
I'm Nano, 26 years old, and the 5th generation in the family business. My father runs the company, but I'm already involved in important strategic decisions because the plan is for me to take over the company eventually. I took over a logistics company in Fulda 2 years ago. We offer complete services from goods receipt to storage and transportation, and we have around 20 employees.
And there have been many questions in the comments about why Nano Janssen is choosing electric trucks, so we'll answer a few questions during the drive. Good morning. It's 2:30 a.m. and I got up at midnight, freshened up, and we were off. I'm driving the first shift now while Nano gets a bit more rest since he'll take over later. We're heading to a small Ionity rest stop north of Bayonne, and this will probably be the last stop we make in France. So we'll cross France with 4 stops, and the range is working out quite well. You also saw that we just passed a toll station because, unlike in Germany, electric trucks aren't exempt from tolls here. If you're a French company, there are some toll benefits for electric trucks, but that doesn't apply to us. But electricity is significantly cheaper here, and the Ionity station we're heading to costs only 33 cents per kilowatt hour, which is cheaper than in Germany at 39 cents. And so far we've been lucky enough to avoid detaching, but we know it won't work this time because there's a height restriction. The good news is that we'll arrive at 4 a.m., and since we'll be sneaking around the back, we won't be disturbing anyone. The first leg was a success. We got through without issues and there wasn't much traffic. Now we're in Laben, there are only a few Ionity stations, and unfortunately, the first one didn't provide full charging power. The second station didn't want to work at first, but after the third attempt, it's charging full power. Now we're topping it off, since this is our last stop in France. We've got one more stop in Spain, and then we'll be in Madrid. And the truck has a nice feature with the lighting at the back, which you can turn on to better see the connections at night. I really like the yellow light, because all the other trucks have these harsh white lights that can be really annoying and tiring for your eyes. We just crossed the border from France into Spain, and we've got 380 kilometers left to the next charging station. We still have 88% in the battery, but we'll need to do a quick driver switch along the way without a charging stop. You also have to pay tolls in Spain, and e-trucks aren't given any special treatment. There are those boxes that you can attach to your windshield and get automatically recognized, but we didn't set that up, so we're paying everything by card instead. Wenn man hinkommt. Zack. Und dann geht's weiter. I think we might have pushed it a bit too far. The charging station is coming up, and we have 5% left in the battery with 0 kilometers of range. We're driving at 55 kilometers per hour, and the emergency call has been activated. You'd expect things to be more relaxed at 5%. It's an interesting question what happens with the last 5%, whether the truck would keep driving at 55 kilometers per hour or not. But now we just hope we find the charging station right away. What's great about Spain, unlike France, is that the rest areas are so spacious. They've paved everything, and we can drive straight ahead to the charging station. We made it, but there are only 2 charging stations here, and one of them is broken. That was a risk, but we saw in the app that it was occupied earlier, and if the app shows it's occupied, that means someone else is charging, which means the station is working. And this might be a general tip. If you're on a road trip and heading to a charging station, I'd always check the app to see if they are occupied and therefore working, or if you can activate the charger. If you start a session and it doesn't show an error, it can massively reduce the risk. I've had situations where I drove to a station, started the session via the app, and then got an error message, which I could have figured out an hour earlier. And here we are actually to blame because we skipped an Ionity station. It worked out in the end, but if you're not as experienced, you might want to rethink that strategy. And it's the complete opposite of France, where everything is really tight. Here, you've got 10 times the space to maneuver the truck. As for the charging speed, it's not as high right now at 7%, but it's gradually increasing. It could be that the Iveco is reducing its charging power, so we'll keep an eye on it. But there's nothing we can do about it because there's no other charging station nearby anyway. The charging process went well, though not at full charging power. We now have enough energy to make it to Madrid by 4 p.m, and we're hoping we can unload right away. And we already handed over the charging station to a BMW i4, who was happy that we were about to leave as he arrived. Now we're just hoping that unloading goes smoothly, and we stay flexible, but we'll only know for sure when the trailer is empty. We had some communication issues earlier, but we're staying optimistic. We've got 200 kilometers to go to Madrid, and we have 77% left in the battery. We made it. We are in Madrid at our unloading site for our main delivery. It should be somewhere up ahead, and Nano is checking if he can find someone. We still have driving time left for today, and the weather is great. Nano is showing off his parking skills. He just made a right turn from this 2-lane street, which is tough. But now we can unload at the gate back there. Really good driving, and I'm glad I didn't have to do it. We've unloaded everything, and in the back you can see the remaining cargo. Barrels of adhesives. What we delivered today were catering appliances for a gastronomy trade fair. These items will be exhibited there, and we'll be taking them back with us when we head back to Germany. In this little alley of the industrial area, I just spotted a Fisker Karma. You probably know Fisker, the company that launched the Ocean and went bankrupt again. Henrik Fisker has now founded a company twice, and this was his first creation. It came out in 2011 or 2012 as a plug-in hybrid. Up front, it had either a 4- or 6-cylinder gasoline engine, but it only served to charge the battery. It had no mechanical connection to the drivetrain. The car was fully powered by its electric motor. Design-wise, it's super impractical, but it still looks really cool. And it had a pretty rare feature, a solar roof. But if I remember correctly, it was only used for climate control inside the car, not for charging the battery. You don't see these often, and honestly, I wouldn't recommend buying one. I think there was even a reboot when a Chinese company took over Fisker. They released a fully electric version, but that didn't succeed either. We're doing a driver swap just past Madrid to split up the driving time. There's a V4 supercharger here, and I've always wanted to test it, but we couldn't get it to work. You have to plug in first, and then activate it via the app, but the Iveco has a timeout feature. If no power flows within a certain time, it shuts off charging entirely. So we'll have to test it again later. Luckily, we don't even need to charge right now, and we're not in a rush. We've driven a good stretch further south, and Nano is busy organizing a return load since we still have half the trailer empty. We're trying to find the best option to make a bit of extra money on the way back. Normally, we drive at 80 to 82 kilometers per hour, but in Spain and France, trucks can go up to 90 kilometers per hour on the highway, which is pretty fast. But speed and aerodynamics are everything when it comes to energy consumption in an electric truck. Turning off the heating doesn't really make a difference. Same with cars, it's better to just slow down a bit. We really wanted to reach this Ionity charging park because the electricity here is cheaper. There were other charging options along the way, but they were all more expensive. We arrived with 11% battery, and we're also way ahead of schedule. Tomorrow, we only have 200 kilometers left to the unloading point, but unloading isn't until Wednesday. So, we basically have a full day off tomorrow. Now we just have to decide whether to stay here longer or go somewhere else. Chromolix is making friends with the Spanish street cats while we charge. Here comes another one. We're charging now, then we'll get a good night's sleep and see what tomorrow brings. The Iveco has 2 beds with an upper bunk that folds down. I never showed it in the videos because I always had it up, but it's actually pretty comfortable for 2 people. Good morning from the Spanish outback. We spent the night here and there's not much going on around us. We're getting ready for the day, heading further south to unload our cargo. The weather is great and we slept really well. The highlight of this rest stop is actually a truck, a Renault Magnum. This iconic truck is about 20 years old and was a real game changer back in the day with its unique design. Even now, it still looks pretty cool. You can tell it's seen some miles and put in serious work. One of its standout features was the suspension. The cab was decoupled from the chassis, making it a really comfortable ride. Another unusual thing is how you get in. Most trucks have steps before the front wheel, but here, you climb in behind it, using handrails to pull yourself up. I just realized it doesn't even have regular door handles. I have no idea how you're supposed to open it. We're fully charged now, and we just have to be mindful of where we drive so we don't end up somewhere with no charging stations. That's why we don't just charge when the battery is empty, but rather a bit earlier to avoid any stress. We also have a 2-day buffer to pick up extra loads or take breaks. By Friday at the latest, we'll be back in Madrid to pick up cargo and then head north again. While we drive through Spain, we have some time and Nano can answer some questions. Could you share how everything started with the logistics company?
In 1896, nearly 128 years ago, my great-great-grandfather founded the logistics company, initially using horse wagons. Until the 1950s and 60s, it was a pure freight logistics company operating with the railways. Back then, logistics worked with the railways, handling long-distance transport, and locally goods were delivered by horse and cart. In the 1950s, my grandfather bought the first truck, and now, in the generation of my father and mine, we are purchasing the first electric trucks. Electric trucks have always been a topic, but we focused on them when we saw the government funding programs. We analyzed what would be the best strategy for the future and decided 2 years ago to go electric. The application for the subsidies took about 9 months. After that, we placed the orders, but the biggest obstacles were securing the transformer, which had a delivery time of over a year, and the delivery dates from truck manufacturers, which got delayed several times. We ordered 41 electric trucks because we felt that with 1 or 2 trucks, we would just be getting familiar with the technology, but they wouldn't really be integrated into the day-to-day business. We now have an entire fleet and can have an employee who focuses solely on the electric trucks. For a medium-sized company like ours, with such high investment sums, there's no turning back. With diesel trucks, there are minor factors that might convince someone to stick with just one manufacturer that also provides service for all vehicles, but with electric trucks, the differences between manufacturers are still vast. There isn't the perfect electric truck yet. Some have higher ranges, but also higher axle loads, while others might have charging issues, and the hitch heights vary greatly among manufacturers. To get a better picture of the industry as a whole, it's essential to test these different options. It's now possible to order electric trucks without subsidies, and in the overall economic calculation, diesel and electric trucks are nearly on par. It always depends on current diesel and electricity prices, but there are only minor operational differences now. In Germany, the exemption from tolls for electric trucks is a big bonus. However, due to the higher acquisition costs, in total cost accounting, they come out about the same. We have some customers who are specifically asking for electric transport, especially because of sustainability reports that need to be made starting next year. There are large corporations affected by this that are happy to collaborate with us. We also transport many plants for garden centers and plant nurseries, and they want to transport sustainably because it's crucial for their image. Our infrastructure with charging stations and storage only makes sense if we have a significant number of electric trucks because the network fees are based on peak power usage. By spreading the peak load over the day with more trucks, we can lower the peak power usage. Having your own infrastructure is relatively expensive, but there are already competitive tariffs available for public charging, so even without our own infrastructure, electric trucks still make financial sense for logistics companies. Having our own infrastructure, though, allows us to become more independent from energy markets and crises, which is a unique opportunity in this sector. Drivers who have been on the road with electric trucks for longer periods don't want to switch back. I think every truck driver should try driving one, at least for a week. Some truck drivers who already drive electric cars have specifically applied to us to drive electric trucks. Overall, I believe the majority of transport will be electric. There are some niche products, such as dangerous goods, where it will still take a long time for electric trucks to take over, but otherwise, it is already feasible in everyday use and also financially viable. The logistics industry is generally very cost-focused, and I think, in the end, the most economical solution will prevail.
We are now in a beautiful industrial area in Andalusia and can say mission accomplished. The forklift driver is unloading the goods, and it seems to be a glass manufacturer. We are delivering special adhesives that were very urgent. And again, a perfect location where both cars and trucks can charge because there's just a lot of space and the trailer is not in the way. The charging power is still just 230 kilowatts, which we've seen everywhere so far in Spain. I could imagine that 350 kilowatts just isn't standard here. They probably check if they can get a network connection and then set the peak power for regular cars. But for our schedule, it's not a big deal. There's a little town here and I think there's a small supermarket somewhere over there, so we'll check that out. As soon as we left, there is a charging party. But these are several test vehicles from Audi. They have red license plates, so I assume they are temporary plates. We're leaving the trailer here after locking it, and we'll head to the camper parking spot because why not? I mean, it's basically just a big motorhome. Good morning from Malaga. We've made it to the southern coast of Spain with the electric truck and we've parked at a really peaceful spot. Today's Wednesday, so we have a free day. We have a direct view of the sea and a few windsurfers are out there. They say that the romance of long-haul trucking is gone, but I can't confirm that. It's so beautiful here and Crumelix is enjoying the sea too. We've already planned a bit. On Friday, we need to pick up the exhibition items that go back to Germany. The trailer isn't fully loaded, so we've arranged another trip to Santander. It's 2,700 kilometers back, and we'll be taking a slightly different route. But I have to say, everything has gone incredibly well so far. We're really breaking down the stereotypes. In domestic long-distance transport, I've already proven for several months that it works, and now we've also conquered international long-distance transport. We're now installing the software update that I already had in the other truck. There are a few unofficial tricks to keep in mind, like not opening or closing the doors during the update process. I think it's not that big of a deal if you do, but we'll just keep it open for now. The update worked. We now have version 5.17.5 installed. One of the improvements I'm aware of is that the trip computer now has graphs for the different trips and also shows the energy value, which is a really useful feature. Another improvement is the charging of the 24-volt battery. The truck used to drain it quite often, especially when left plugged in for multiple days. Another benefit is improved Bluetooth connectivity, and apparently, the brake light behavior during regeneration has also been updated. We'll find out how everything works on the road, but now we have a lot more data for the return trip. Our return journey starts, and first we're picking up the trailer. We can drive a bit faster since the trailer isn't attached right now, and it's only a short drive anyway. Our schedule is actually pretty tight. It's Thursday evening, and we need to be finished by Saturday night. Otherwise, we won't be allowed to drive in either France or Germany. We can do 2 shifts of 21 hours each, with a 9-hour break in between. So we'll see how far we can make it. Our first stop is Madrid, where we'll pick up the cargo we originally brought here. Then we have 2 return loads to pick up near Santander. Here are the Ionity chargers, and there's our trailer. We're currently at 88% charge, so we continue right away. Hooking up the trailer was easy, and now we're heading 200 kilometers to an Ionity station we haven't visited before. We skipped it last time since we didn't need it, but we'll stop there now because the other station didn't provide full charging power. If we can get a good charge and a few extra kilowatt hours there, it'll make the trip smoother. When you want to drive fast and maximize efficiency, everything has to work perfectly. So we're using what we learned on the way here. We're now making our first quick charging stop. There are 2 empty Ionity chargers here, so we'll see the best way to position the truck and top up to 90%. Charging is working, and since it's the middle of the night, no one cares how we're parked. One thing we've noticed with Ionity chargers in Spain is that they never go above 240 kilowatts. The 350 kilowatt speeds just aren't common here, probably because the grid connections are different. We even had one charger that only managed 180 kilowatts. I guess the demand for higher power just isn't there yet. And a good takeaway from this trip is that it doesn't make sense to run the battery too low and stress over range. The best strategy is to finish the day with a low charge and just top up in between when you're at 30, 40 or 50%. The charging curve is very stable, so it doesn't really matter at what state of charge you plug in. Of course, every charge stop means getting off the highway, plugging in, and that alone costs 5 to 10 minutes. But overall, there's no real-time loss. It's just part of the trip. One thing that really stands out in Spain is the long trucks. They have a full semi-truck pulling another trailer using a dolly axle. Basically, the dolly is attached to the first trailer, and then they add a second one. I have no idea how you'd park something like that, but these setups are pretty common here. I'm not sure if they have the same regulations as in Germany, where long trucks are only allowed on certain routes, but it's definitely something unique I've noticed here. At this charging stop, I took the liberty of parking a bit more freely, since it's the middle of the night. Last time, the one at the very back gave us 240 kilowatts, but it didn't work at all this time. The second charger immediately had a communication error, but the third one worked. I tried charging at a V4 supercharger, which seemed like a good idea in theory, but in reality it's not. The charging stalls need to support both the power and the voltage, but also the rectifiers, which are installed somewhere centrally. The stalls you plug into are just dispensers, while the actual charging technology is housed in the enclosure back there. Even though the V4 superchargers are new, the rectifiers are still from an older generation and only support 500 volts. So while they've prepared for the future, in practice, this truck can't charge at Tesla stations. Here's a cool new feature that came with the update. We're going slightly downhill, and when I activate regeneration, the brake lights turn on once I reach the 4th level. I still need to figure out whether it's based on the stage or the maximum recuperation power in kilowatts, since that varies with speed. In an older video, I mentioned that with full recuperation, the brake lights didn't turn on at all. Even if it was technically legal, it still made sense to have them activate, and now they do. We've arrived in Madrid. We temporarily parked the trailer because it would have been too tight otherwise. Over there is a small Ionity charging park, but there's construction going on. Only the 2 leftmost spots are free, and honestly, you wouldn't be able to park here with a trailer anyway. The BYD driver didn't speak English, and we don't speak Spanish, but we managed to communicate with gestures. He helped guide us in since we had to get super close for the cable to reach. Ionity never likes hearing that their cables are put under a lot of tension, but that's just how it is when they are too short for trucks. As expected, charging is limited to 240 kilowatts. One piece of feedback for charging station operators: if your chargers aren't available because of construction, just mark them as offline in the back end. At this location, the system showed 6 chargers as available, but only 2 are accessible. It's 8 a.m. and we're back at our good old Fisker Karma, which hasn't moved an inch. Maybe it's broken, who knows? Now we'll get loaded and then head north. We're now north of Burgos, at a small charging park from Charging Together. They have several 180 kilowatt chargers that support 900 volts, but there's also a 350 kilowatt charger with a Porsche label. Porsche has a partnership here since they're the only vehicles in Spain that can take full advantage of that power, but it works great for trucks as well. It's actually a bit more expensive than Ionity, but given the limited number of reliable 350 kilowatt chargers in Spain, you take what you can get. Some employees from Charging Together are here as well, and I shared a lot of insights with them since they're also planning for truck charging infrastructure. For them, it's really interesting to see how it works in practice. We're now at a logistics yard to pick up the new cargo. It wasn't easy to find since we initially had the wrong address, but I think we're in the right place now. We're loading 14 pallets, about 8 tons, and once that's done, we can keep going. However, our shift time is almost up. We started at 9 p.m., and with a 21-hour shift, we have to stop by 6 p.m. It's already 4 p.m., so we should just make it to the charging station. The loading is taking longer than planned, so we have to wait, and we'll end up spending the night here. Luckily, there's a rest area right across the street. We had hoped to drive another 2 to 3 hours today, but if the cargo isn't ready, there's nothing we can do. Good morning. We're back on the road in the middle of the night, heading back to Germany. We spent the night at the loading site and took our rest break there. Now I'm taking the night shift, which gives me a bit more flexibility since charging stations are easier to access at night. We plan to drive straight to France, but I'll probably make a quick charging stop. We could have made it with some hypermiling in the rain, but it's not worth the stress. We're at 50% battery now, and we're taking a slightly different route to enter Germany near Freiburg. When I say more flexibility at night, I mean exactly this. Parking in a way I wouldn't during the day. This spot is just a car wash, and I highly doubt anyone is showing up to wash their car at 2 a.m. in the rain. The first charger didn't cooperate, but the second one worked. But as expected in Spain, it's only delivering around 240 kilowatts. I'm charging up to 60% to make it to France, where we're hoping for good coffee, cheaper electricity, and faster charging speeds. 3 solid reasons not to stay here too long. One detail, the way this station is built. There's a small container, likely housing the rectifiers, and the chargers are mounted on blocks with cables running underneath, no excavation needed. Simple, scalable, and efficient. It doesn't look fancy, but for a charging station, it's totally fine. Welcome to France. We arrived with 15%. The right side charger isn't working, but the others are fine. You couldn't see on Google Maps that the entrances are incredibly narrow, so narrow that nothing bigger than a car can fit through. Unfortunately, it's raining, but as they say, there's no bad weather, only bad clothes. Like my shoes, which aren't waterproof. The charging performance here is also great at 322 kilowatts. It's way more enjoyable when things go so quickly. You might have noticed at the Ionity stations in France or Austria that there's always this random triple charger that seems a bit out of place, like they forgot to remove it. This might be a bit of a guess, but I think that in France and Austria, one of the conditions for the funding was to include a CHAdeMO charging point. So if you have an older Nissan Leaf or a Nissan ENV 200, you can use these chargers. I believe the thickness of the cable suggests it's also 43 kilowatts, so even the old Zoe driver in me is happy. It's actually kind of funny when you want to pay with a card. You have to climb down because there's no card reader on top. Bleibt man zumindest fit. At least it keeps you fit. From the Spanish countryside to the French countryside, we're really out in the middle of nowhere. But there's a charging operator here who's set up quite a few stations. The company is called IE Charge. The special thing about them is that they have relatively high charging power, officially up to 320 kilowatts, although I'll explain why that's not always the case. But the big advantage is that it's super cheap. The base price is 30 cents per kilowatt hour, and if you charge via the app, you'll pay only 25 cents, which is perfect for truckers. The downside is that they often advertise these high charging values but don't achieve them. But you can see what you're currently paying, the charging time, and current charging power. You can also see what state of charge we started with, 37%. And now it gets interesting because you can drill down even further. You can see a charging curve for our session and the voltage and current, as well as the price we're paying, but that isn't accurate as we pay less through the app. But for some reason, it's not showing the most important thing, how much kilowatt hours we've charged so far. Now let me explain why they're able to offer cheaper prices. These stations are always near substations or big power lines. That means there's very little network infrastructure needed, and that's reflected in the price. This is where charging with the truck works really well. For cars, this location makes no sense, unless you're a nature lover and want to walk your dog. But for trucks, a 5-minute detour is totally worth it, because you save so much money. So this is the cheapest charging operator we've ever seen, and it makes sense to build charging parks near power lines rather than at rest areas. The idea is to have trucks charge where the energy infrastructure is, rather than where the traditional gas stations are. It's a shift in thinking, because in logistics it's all about the cost and not the convenience. What an electric trucker likes to do is check the type plates, because here you can see that these fast charging stations typically provide 500 amps of current, but this one can only handle 400 amps. That means we're pretty much at the limit. Right now we're at 390 amps, which is probably just a bit of buffer, so it's already at its maximum charging power. The 320 kilowatts is really a theoretical value. Considering the battery must actually be at 800 volts to reach that level, it's important to always see that in context. We're the true truck charging station testers, and this charging park didn't pass the test. We've killed everything. Our charging session ended, and the car's charging session ended as well. We charged 400 kilowatts, and that was apparently too much. It shows again that robustness is still the core issue charging point operators need to work on. That session wasn't even maximum load. Whether it charges a bit slower or faster doesn't matter as long as it can handle the load and doesn't stop. We made a small stop here because due to the charger shutdown, we didn't have enough buffer. There's a huge Ionity charging park with solar carports here. On the other side, there's the same setup, but in France, they're very strictly separated. It's still one station, and you can walk over to the other highway side, but you can't drive across. It's crazy how tight these toll stations are. You have to drive so carefully to get through without hitting anything. Since charging stations for 25 cents per kilowatt hour are quite rare, we decided to head to the next one. It was on the way, but in the middle of nowhere again. Honestly though, this detour is 100% worth it. It's currently charging at 273 kilowatts, and the charging power is still slightly increasing. We're still in France and won't be leaving today, so we're charging now and we'll drive to a rest stop where we'll spend our Sunday. The rest of the drive will be on Monday, or rather, we'll head out Sunday night. But we're taking advantage of this extra charge now. The low price comes with its drawbacks. The front station's cable got hot and was stopping the charging every few minutes. So we moved to the other station, but we're experiencing the same issue. It seems like the rectifiers inside the little building can't handle continuous operation. There's a big difference between 320 kilowatts peak and 320 kilowatts continuous power. This should be clearly stated on the charging stations because the peak value isn't what's relevant for trucks. It would be a good legislative proposal that they should only list the value if it can be held continuously. Otherwise, there should be a small asterisk with a note on how long the peak can actually last. It's 10 p.m. and we're right on time for the Sunday driving ban. Now we're looking for a good parking spot and there are Ionity stations here as well. The conclusion of the trip is that we had to make too many stops because the stations weren't optimally located. If we had pushed for it, we could have made fewer stops, but we weren't in that much of a hurry, and having a buffer in the battery isn't a bad thing. It's really surprising that the trucks in front are parked in the second row, while the rest of the rest stop is empty. I don't understand why they don't just step out, walk over, and then park somewhere else. But we found a parking spot. Unfortunately next to a cooling trailer, but it's fine. I'll say goodnight for now. It's Sunday, and I'm a bit sleepy but well rested. Took a walk with the dog in the nice park here, and the rest area isn't as crowded as I thought. We'll charge up a bit later so we can head out at 10 p.m. tonight. We still have a few hundred kilometers to go, but from now on it's smooth sailing, so I'd say the road trip to Spain was a success. But I wanted to show you something quickly. This is a custom seal. It starts from the front of the trailer, runs through every strap so it can't be opened, and goes all the way to the back. The same setup is on the other side. These two cords come together here, and then it's sealed with a custom seal. For some goods, the shippers require this to ensure nothing gets stolen and everything is secure. I believe during a police inspection, they can open the seal and then reseal it with a police seal. But since we're carrying very valuable goods, it's super important, because we're carrying chocolate.
Alles voll mit Schokolade.
The whole trailer is full of chocolate. But a lot of trucks have their doors open at rest areas so people can peek inside. And the reason for that is theft. To prevent thieves from cutting the tarps when there's nothing valuable in there, truckers leave the doors open so the thief can take a look and not cause any damage. It's a bit sad, but that's reality. So if you see open doors, now you know why. The three of us had a lot of fun over the last 3 weeks. I hope I get to do something like this again soon. Of course, it's not the everyday route to drive to southern Spain, but it's doable, especially with charging stations offering 25 cents per kilowatt hour. There were a few things we could have optimized, but we played it safe, and overall, it was a success. I had to pause for a moment because I couldn't find my dog. I was wandering around a bit since he wasn't on the big field either. Then a French guy came by and told me he was up front at the restaurant. Yeah, it's mine. Thank you, merci. It's not really funny, but he knows the places where we always meet up. We were in the restaurant yesterday. Anyway, the week's done, and I'd say, look forward to the next video. There's a cool job with a solar trailer coming up. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.